Biafra, superstars, media.
The Biafran War was one of the most brutal and bloody conflicts of modern times. Also known as the Nigerian Civil War, it left 1 million dead and millions more displaced. It also shaped so much of our thinking on secession and independence. And yet today, it's largely forgotten. So what was the conflict all about, and why was it so especially significant? Countries. As I've noted many times, the international community has a deep aversion to secession. States particularly detest unilateral secession. However, while we might like to think that these ideas have existed for centuries, in truth, the current thinking evolved over several decades after 1945 and the founding of the United Nations. In particular, contemporary attitudes to secession can be traced back to two very specific cases of separatism that occurred in Africa in the 1960s. In a previous video, I looked at the first of these, Katanga's attempt to break away from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. However, while Katanga's secession set out the idea of opposing unilateral secession, these ideas would not be truly cemented until the Biafran War just a few years later. Between them, these two cases serve to underscore the idea that the principle of respecting the territorial integrity of states no longer applied just to threats from other countries. Henceforth, it would also be applied to internal attempts to secede. But the Biafran War also stands out for another reason. Also known as the Nigerian Civil War, it's now largely forgotten in the wider world. And yet, when it took place in the late 1960s, it was widely considered to be the humanitarian tragedy of its era. Over the course of 3 years it lasted, it's estimated that well over 1 million people died, either directly in the fighting or as an indirect result of the famine and illness arising from it. So what was the Biafran War? Nigeria lies in West Africa at around 910,000 square kilometres or 350,000 square miles. It's the 31st largest of the 193 members of the United Nations. Its population is currently estimated to be in the region of 200 million. This makes it the most populous country in Africa and 7th in the world as a whole. It's also extremely diverse. It's estimated that the country is made up of more than 250 different ethno-linguistic groups. However, the three main groups are the Hausa and Fulani, representing around 30% of the population and located mainly in the north of the country, the Yoruba, who make up around 20% of the population and from the southwest of Nigeria, and the Igbo, who represent 20% and come from the southeast of the country. The story really begins in the middle of the 19th century and the European colonial scramble for Africa. In 1851, British forces captured the coastal port of Lagos, which was formally annexed in 1865. Then, in 1885, Britain was awarded a number of other territories in the region under the Berlin Conference, which formalised a lot of the European colonial holdings in Africa. In 1900, these territories formally became the Southern Nigerian Protectorate and the Northern Nigerian Protectorate. However, the crucial moment came in 1914. Facing a budget deficit in the Northern Protectorate, the two protectorates were merged to form the Colony and Protectorate of Nigeria, a step that would eventually have profound implications for the country. Following the end of the Second World War and the start of the process of decolonisation, Britain prepared to depart the country. In 1954, as Nigeria moved towards independence, it was reconstituted as the Federation of Nigeria. This was composed of three regions that broadly mapped onto the main groups: the Hausa Fulani, Northern Nigeria, the Igbo, Eastern Nigeria, and the Yoruba, Western Nigeria. 6 years later, on the 1st of October 1960, Nigeria formally became independent, joining the United Nations soon afterwards. In 1964, the country held its first post-independence general election. Marred by serious political violence, the final results, which were highly disputed, saw a victory by the Northern People's Congress. Over the course of 1965, tensions grew in the country, and on the 15th of January 1966, a number of junior military officers from the southern Igbo ethnic group launched an attempted coup. This led to the assassination of 22 senior political and military figures, including the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, the Premier of Western Nigeria, and Sir Ahmadu Bello, the Premier of Northern Nigeria. Although the coup was quickly defeated, its effects would be widely felt. On the 28th of July, another coup saw Northern Army officers take control of the country. In reprisal for the earlier attempted coup, they executed several hundred Southerners, most of them ethnic Igbo. At the same time, the attacks on Igbo living in the north increased, with an estimated 10 to 30,000 people murdered. This sparked a mass exodus of Igbo from the north, as up to 2 million fled south to the safety of the Igbo-dominated eastern region. By now, the country was in crisis, and talk was growing of eastern secession. On the 4th and 5th of January 1967, the British government organised a peace conference in Ghana between the Nigerian leader, Colonel Yakubu Gowon, and the leader of Eastern Province, Colonel Odumegwu Ojukwu. There the sides appeared to reach an agreement, the Aburi Accord. However, a dispute soon arose over what exactly the sides had agreed. In Ojukwu's view, this now paved the way for the creation of a loose confederation in Nigeria. However, this was rejected by the central government. Meanwhile, at the start of May, and in an attempt to weaken the East, which was also a centre of the country's increasingly important oil production, the government announced that the country would be reconstituted into 12 states. On the 30th of May 1967, Ojukwu responded by unilaterally declaring independence, formally proclaiming the creation of the Republic of Biafra. Then, just over a month later, on the 6th of July 1967, the federal government declared war on the breakaway province. In retrospect, the result never seemed in doubt. In the months that followed, the Nigerian army made considerable headway. Aided by the fact that non-Igbo areas in the east sided with the federal government, the area under the control of the Biafran authorities shrank by a third by August. Meanwhile, in October, the Biafran capital, Enugu, fell to Nigerian troops, forcing the administration to relocate. However, the most significant blow came in May 1968, when the government took control of Port Harcourt, thus imposing a blockade on Biafra. As a result, the region now suffered a famine that left well over 1 million people dead. In the course of the following year, the Nigerian army continued to make progress, and by the end of 1969, the conflict was all but lost. At the start of 1970, Ojukwu fled, and on the 15th of January, the war officially came to an end after 30 months, when the chief of the Biafran army declared that the Republic of Biafra had ceased to exist. A few days later, and in an attempt to start the process of national reconciliation and reconstruction, General Gowon, as the head of the country's military government, gave a speech stating that there was no victor, no vanquished. In the years since then, Nigeria has deliberately tried to forget about its civil war, although pro-Biafran feeling still exists in the country, a topic that I hope to come back to at some point. Internationally, the Biafran War had a huge impact at the time. At a public level, the Biafran cause attracted massive sympathy, especially after pictures emerged of starving Biafran children. This led to a major international humanitarian effort, the Biafran Airlift, by various non-governmental organisations and church groups. Meanwhile, at an official level, Biafra also enjoyed a degree of support. In fact, 5 UN members actually recognised it as an independent state. The first to do so was Tanzania on the 13th of April 1968. It was soon followed by Gabon, Ivory Coast and Zambia. The only non-African state to recognise it was Haiti. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, it enjoyed support, including military assistance from Spain, Portugal, Rhodesia, South Africa, Israel and France, all of which saw a weakened Nigeria as potentially beneficial. But these were very much the outliers. The vast majority of the international community instead lined up to support the Nigerian government. African states in particular viewed the developments with grave concern. Like Nigeria, many had recently become independent within colonial borders that often saw a diverse mix of ethnic groups forced to live under the same roof. As they saw it, Biafra's secession posed an existential threat to their own territorial integrity. Indeed, the Organisation of African Unity, the forerunner of today's African Union, played a key role in rallying regional and international support for Nigeria. However, two countries emerged as particularly strong Nigerian allies: Britain and the Soviet Union. In Britain's case, this was driven by a couple of key factors. First of all, as it was engaged in an effort to prevent the recognition of Rhodesia's 1965 unilateral declaration of independence, it would not have looked good to support another unilateral secession elsewhere. Secondly, judging from the start that Nigeria would win, it sought to protect its own significant oil investments in the country. As for the USSR, it saw the war as an opportunity to win over Nigeria, which had long been seen as one of the strongest opponents of communism in sub-Saharan Africa. Interestingly, the United States steered well clear of the war, viewing it as an internal affair and not wishing to become embroiled in another conflict as it was fighting in Vietnam. It officially opted to remain neutral and chose not to supply arms to either side. More broadly, and notwithstanding the support Biafra enjoyed in certain limited quarters, its attempt to break away served to cement the idea that states should not recognise unilateral secession. Up until that point, the idea of respecting the territorial integrity of states had been essentially understood as respecting the borders of countries in the face of external aggression. However, the Congo crisis and then Biafra underscored the emerging idea that states should also respect the territorial integrity of one another in the face of internal separatist threats. As well as being the most populous country in Africa, Nigeria is also one of the most obviously divided. Like so many other examples of colonial state creation, the British decision in the early 20th century to merge the two Nigerian protectorates, a decision taken for economic reasons, created an entity that was fundamentally at odds with itself. This would eventually have dramatic and tragic consequences following the country's independence in 1960. The tensions between North and South soon spilled over into the political arena, leading to mass killings and one of the most significant wars to affect modern Africa. Indeed, the Biafran War was widely regarded as the most pressing humanitarian disaster of its day. Over the course of 2.5 years, millions died in a conflict that led to mass starvation. It also left a powerful legacy in terms of the contemporary rules on secession. While public opinion tended to be strongly on the side of the Igbo people, at an official level, most countries, especially in Africa, either opted to openly or tacitly support the Nigerian position. Facing their own secessionist challenges, they saw the conflict as a chance to affirm the importance of respecting the territorial integrity of states, not only against external aggression, but also against internal challenges. And yet, for all its significance, the Biafran War, the Nigerian Civil War, is now largely forgotten.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're hearing my voice from. This is the Biafran Golden Child, and I'm highly elated as other times to make this audio video via the Biafra Superstar Media. Yes, I'm mighty glad to, have the opportunity to interact with other freedom lovers and well-meaning gentlemen and ladies of this country. Yes. My audio this morning will be talking about the transient nature of power, and I want to make this audio because last Sunday at the church service, the man of God, the preacher, was talking about the transient nature of positions, and the preacher preached vigorously, encouraging people to see every position of authority as an opportunity to excel, to do more good, to be of service to people, to the generality of the people, not positions to, lord it down or play God or demigod to the subordinates or followers who follow you. The preacher was very, very clear, that when you assume positions of leadership, you should realize you're coming to serve. You're coming to be of use to the generality of people who are, your subordinates within that leadership position. You're never coming there to lord it over them. You're never coming to superimpose your power, to determine, to ensure, to insist. No, he says such words are not leadership oriented. They are not democratic principles. That such positions are antithetical to good leadership. And they encourage people to always remember this position you have today, this position you are today. Someone has been there in the past. Someone was there only recently before you got there. So if that person had treated every other person badly, if that other person had felt it's my turn, it's my life, it's my opportunity to deal with every person, of course you might not have survived to come and become a leader too. So he said people don't learn. He's shocked that a lot of people, they don't learn from others. They don't learn. They come there and they forget who they are. They come and they forget their roots. They come and they feel this is my chance. I will do everything I can. I am above board. I am above board. Like Napoleon, who is always right. I am right. Everyone else is wrong. He said that was very uh, antithetical to good leadership. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring to our fore today the transcendent nature of leadership. Of leadership, I want to remind all those who are in positions of authority and who are acting as though there is no tomorrow. They have handled positions of leadership as if it's their birthright, as if, of course, they'll be there forever. But of course, some of them have forgotten that history is beckoning, and every person has their history. No matter how you think, nobody knows what you're doing. No matter how you feel, nobody remembers what you have done. History will always be there to vindicate the just. History will always be there to judge the wicked. History will always be there, for unborn generations and for others to see just how much of a leader you were, just how much of a good person you were. History would always be there, and a lot of people who have died today, people who have left positions of leadership, they are ashamed, those of them who are still alive, when they remember, when the things they did are recounted to them vividly, written in history books, vividly, and written in videos and newspapers, vividly shown on videos. In fact, during these days of social media, it's even more difficult to hide certain things because, of course, videos go viral. The world, more than at any point in time, has become a global village. So what is happening at Ogbomosho now, you'll be surprised. People in Atlanta, people in Australia, people in Oklahoma, people in Japan, they are watching it at the same time. Even sometimes earlier than those of us in this country, something happening in Abuja, the people in China will be viewing it live and direct. So there's no hiding place now for any wicked person. And so, for the basis of this audio, I want to recount briefly what we have had as Nigerian rulers, Nigerian leaders over the years. I mean, if you begin to recount from the time when Nigeria got its independence in 1960, yes, when the British handed over to the Nigerian elected leadership for the first time. And of course, this leadership then, the mantle of leadership fell on Alhaji Tafa Balewa, a humble educationist, who was foisted into power as the Prime Minister of Nigeria, and he had as his president then, even though ceremonial capacity, the great Zik of Africa, an intellectual, an eloquent, and a vibrant nationalist as his, deputy, quote and unquote, president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria under the prime ministerial position, which Nigeria first assumed when they got independence. Alhaji Tafawa Balewa has been adjudged as a kind man, a humane man, a humanist who always tried to enunciate policies and programs that will bring peace, that will bring development, that will bring progress to Nigeria of that time. In fact, it's on record that he and the late nnamdi Azikiwe, although both deceased now, they cooperated so well to the extent that none took decisions without the other. And so when Alhaji Tafawa Balewa was a prime minister, every other time, whatever decisions he took, people rightly said and complimented the fact that he and Nnamdi Azikiwe worked as a team, and there was no rancor, no acrimony between the two of them. So Alhaji Tafawa Balewa did well. He was a humble man. He was educated, and he learned from an icon like Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, and both of them pulled Nigeria forward. Unfortunately, because of certain undue proclivities that erupted then, the coup of 1966 brought an abrupt end to that administration. Yes, the coup of 1966 came in again, and after the coup, General Aguiyi Ironsi was foisted to be the first military head of state of Nigeria. General Aguiyi Ironsi equally was a brave man, a brave soldier, a soldier to the core, who looked at Nigeria as one entity, who never desired anything apart from one Nigeria. In fact, they said that because of his love for the unity of Nigeria, he had friends from all over the regions. In fact, his best friend today, who eventually died with him, was from the southwest. And so Aguiyi Ironsi, tried to placate the country to bring peace. I mean, after the coup of 1966, he just felt, well, let's make peace, let's bring Nigeria one, let's cool down the tempo. Unfortunately, because of the permutations and the altercations that were a direct, product of the aftermath, so to speak, of the 1966 coup, a lot of wrangling, killings, quarrelings, suspicions trailed that period, and the North boiled. The North boiled because, of course, they had killed several personalities, from the northern region within that coup, and those people in the north felt, why did they not kill the contemporaries of these our leaders, in the southwest, in the southeast, in the south-south? Why were our leaders why should they be the ones who will be killed, who were deleted during that coup? And so this undue palpitations, created wickedness of heart within the north, and the north went on rampage, killing, as it were, every person they suspected was an Igbo man, because of course that coup was touted to have been orchestrated by Kaduna Nzogo, an Igbo man whom they think was from the southeast, and therefore every person from the southeast must pay for the Southerners' death, must pay for Alhaji Tafawa Balewa's death, must pay for all the mayhem that happened in the coup there. So unfortunately, the General Aguiyi Ironsi, a man of peace, a military man to the core, he couldn't, he could not rise up to the occasion. He was thinking he was placating the North. He was thinking he was making peace. He was traveling around to calm down tempo. But during that time, unfortunately, he was brutally assassinated in the company of his friend, Dekule Fajri. And so there goes another leadership position in Nigeria. There goes another head of state that was brutally assassinated. After him came the young man, General Yakubu Gowon, who was young, and history has recorded that General Yakubu Gowon remains the youngest person who has ever attained the saddle of leadership in this country. I mean, who became a head of state at barely the age of 28. He was a head of state far beyond his time. So he took up a position of authority. He became a head of state at a very young age. In fact, he married as a head of state. You can imagine a single bachelor who was a head of state, and eventually he married. When he married Victoria Gowon, in fact, the Queen of England had to come all the way from Great Britain to attend that wedding. It was a wonderful wedding, and Jaragawan came in with a lot of expectations. Of course, as what he did was appoint seasoned politicians, uh, seasoned technocrats, highly experienced people, to work with him, to be in this Federal Executive Council. And they really took Nigeria to heights that were really, really unprecedented. Yeah, unfortunately, too, the same situation came up because after that killings, after the rancor in 1966, after the coup of 1966, when the North felt, its leaders, great men, nationalities, has been brutally deleted, the North went on rampage, and it spilled even into the Gowon's tenure. The Southeast felt highly marginalized. The Southeast felt very vulnerable, and they called Gowon, do something about this. We cannot continue to have the center, living in aloof, or as if they don't know what's happening within these regions. That people are being killed, people are being marginalized. The Southeast, we are most at times driven back from all the other regions of the country. And even when they try to find solace within the Southeast, some of them were still victimized there. And so, under Colonel Odumogo Juku, then, who was the general commander of the Southeast region, he was very vociferous. He was very uh, candid. He was particularly not too happy that the head of state, Jacob Gowon, was playing lip service to, what might seem, what might seem like a deliberate attempt to annihilate and destroy the Igbo people. So Ojukwu fought vehemently, spoke vehemently, and told Gowon, look, this can't go like this. You are the head of state, live up to be the head of state. Make sanctions. Keep my people safe. Keep people from Southeast safe. We can't be slaughtered like chickens or sheep every other day. We can't be driven away from our properties, because of the aftermath of the civil. The first coup. What they called the Zogu coup. We don't want to. It wasn't an Igbo coup. We don't want to be at the brunt of what we don't know about. So go on, and Ojukwu had constant, altercations and discussions over this issue. Partly when this thing could not be resolved, and it eventually led to, Ojukwu asking for, well, the Biafra had to secede. If you don't want us comfortable in the contraption called Nigeria, then we'll secede. We'll go back to a place and make peace and live in peace and harmony and paddle our canoe ourselves, gather our resources to ourselves and move forward. Of course, Gowon didn't want that too, and this thing led to the unfortunate civil war that started between 1967 to 70. And when world leaders came, through the Organization of African Unity, they tried to bring Gowon, General Gowon once again, with the Colonel Ojukwu then to sit down and dialogue together. In fact, that dialogue was held, the conference was held at Aburi, Ghana, under the leadership then of the Ghanaian president then. The Aburi, what has become the Aburi Accord, saw Nigeria and the Southeast, then Biafra, reaching certain resolutions. The Southeast told them through Colonel Ojukwu then, look, this is what we want. Our people should not be marginalized. We should not be killed like fowl. We should be left to strive everywhere we go. Appointments in civil service should be reprogrammed so that the Southeast can be comfortably, at place too with other regions. We should not be marginalized at all. Bring peace to us. Don't let us be scapegoats anywhere. Protect the right and properties of people from Southeast. If you do all this, then we'll join back, we'll come and join Nigeria again. We'll come back without any ado, without any demands anymore. These famous declarations were called the Aburu Accord declarations. Of course, now Gowon accepted while in Ghana, and they thought it was all over. But now they came down to Nigeria. Gowon consulted his committee of wise men. These people I told you, his advisors, his mentors, people who he always resorted when he wanted to take any decision about Nigeria. Of course, Gowon told them, and when they read through the so-called Aburu declarations, the Aburu regulations, and Aburu recommendations, they told Gowon, "No way! If you accept this, you have sold out." General Duku has used language to becloud your thinking. He has manipulated you using the Queen's English. Aburi Accord, if you accept this and you bring it into, you make it hold, then Nigeria is gone. The Southeasterners will dominate this country. They will hold Nigeria at the jugular. They will be the ones who superintend affairs. You have lost your legitimacy as a head of state. Of course, you have ceded Nigeria, the whole of Nigeria, to the Southeast. And so when Gowon heard this, he reneged on the Aburi Accord, and he said, "No, we don't want any such thing. Biafra must come back to Nigeria. It is a part of Nigerian colony, part of Nigerian country. It must come back and remain a region in Nigeria, willy-nilly. Otherwise, let the war escalate. We don't care." So unfortunately, Gowon, because of his reluctance and inexperience to have taken the bulls by the horns by respecting the Aburi decisions and Aburi recommendations, set alight what eventually became the escalation of the civil war in Nigeria. Okay, but that's by the by. That's for General Gowon. Eventually, though, Gowon still was the one who, when Biafra capitulated in 1970, the same Gowon declared no victor, no vanquish. Still in his humane nature, he said, "No victor, no vanquish. The East is free. Let's intermingle. Let's interact. Let's integrate together." He declared the 3 R's: rehabilitation, reconciliation, and reconstruction. And everybody thought it was okay. But again, Gowon made a fatal decision to which again put the Igbo man at a very negative light. The same Gowon who said, "No victor, no vanquished," was the same one who said, "We give the 3 R's, we welcome you back, we're going to reconstruct, we're going to reconstruct, we are going to rehabilitate you." The same Gowon was equally the one who, when it was time, to create a palliative for the Igbos who had lost out because of the Civil War, who had lost properties, who had lost businesses, who had been almost fully annihilated. When it was time to give them a palliative, what did the Gowon advisors tell him? Give them £20, and tell them to come back to the country with £20. So it was a very sad one, because no matter how much you had in the bank before the Civil War, no matter what you were worth, even if it was millions, you were gifted with a paltry £20. £20 to go and start afresh in a hostile Nigeria. Yes, and unfortunately, about this time, the indigenization decree was promulgated, which meant that if you have the money, you can buy into multinational corporations that were fast leaving Nigeria, because, of course, the change of guard of 1960 independence had taken place. And so the north, the southwest, a lot of people, they had their money intact. Of course, they bought into these companies. They bought shares that enabled them have controlling power over these shares. Their children were given jobs because of the new positions they had in multinational corporations. But the Igbo man who had only £20 at this time, even if you had 10 wives, even if you have 3 wives and 10 children, you were gifted with 20 pounds, you had little or nothing to offer. And so there and then, the Igbo man was reduced to a second fiddle, to a vassal or a defeated people. But thanks be to God, no matter what was intended then, it didn't come to be. Because finally, that 20 pounds, a lot of Igbo people saw they could not compete within Nigeria alone. They diversified. They went into importation of clothing, importation of foodstuffs, importation businesses. They brought in all sort of things and they exported all sort of things. And today, the Igbo man can hold his head high in the committee of regions in Nigeria and say, yes, even though we had just 20 pounds, we can still hold our head high. We can still stand out from the crowd. We are by no means a defeated nation. We are by no means a people who cannot fend for themselves. We could never beg like Somalians did. We could never beg or become pariahs, social pariahs. So that is as per go on. So the Senghor one was removed again, was dished away in a coup, and this time Murtala Mohammed came in. Of course, Murtala Mohammed, we all know his antecedents, even as much as during the Civil War, he and his um, cronies like Olusegun Obasanjo, they were amongst those that fought Biafra to a standstill, that made sure they gave Biafra fatal blows that made capitulation quite easy for them. I mean, Murtala was one of those who broke through Asaba, who broke down the Onitsha Bridge, who penetrated the southeast during that as a commander in Nigerian army and gave devastating blows to Nigerians and to the Biafrans. And of course, we Biafra had no choice at all than to give up because, of course, they cut off aids from the air, cut off humanitarian aids from the air, from the sea, from the land. Of course, they made life very difficult for the southeastern, the Biafra region, and there was no other option than for Dim Otumogwu to capitulate. He went on exile to Ivory Coast, and Philip Effiong and Sir Mbanefo eventually, capitulated for Biafra. And that's a long story. Yes, General Murtala Mohammed took over. Yeah, despite the war experience, he came in and tried to, bring a lot of achievements into the country. He did a lot. He brought in peace. He brought in, tried to reconcile regions. He even created more states so that Nigeria can, no longer operate. I mean, everybody could experience equal opportunities. He created Imo State. He created Anambra State and some other states. Unfortunately, he too did not last long because another coup on the 13th February coup led by Buka Suka Dimpa saw him out of the way. He was assassinated while going to the mosque for his prayers, Friday prayers. Once again, his able lieutenant, General Olusegun Obasanjo, took over. And even though General Olusegun came home then and said, "Oh, the shoes of my master is too much for me. General Murtala Mohammed, I can never fill your shoes. I can't bring myself to take your position." Eventually, General Olusegun Obasanjo took the position, became the head of state. He did a whole lot of things. He tried to transit Nigeria to move with the times. I mean, this was a huge time of economic, achievements, especially because of oil and oil business. Nigeria had joined OPEC and money was flowing like water. Obasanjo tried his best, did what he could, and it is on record that he was a good man within that time. And quickly, he made sure that, look, this time we don't want to continue with military regimes. Let's bring back the civilian regime, another phase. This time, let's bring back democracy. And so it is credited to Olusegun Obasanjo that he was the one who championed the processes and, conducted another election that brought in President Shehu Shagari. Shehu Shagari came in again, a good guy, did all he could. He had his able vice president, Alex Ekweme, an architect, and they tried and did all they could. Of course, they went on, but of course, the politicians came, they forgot what happened during the First Republic. They forgot what happened, that when you are holding the mantles of power, you have to be very careful. You have to know that it is transient. You have to know that eyes are watching you on seeing eyes. You have to know that history is becoming. So most of the Second Republic civilians, they started self-aggrandizement. They took corruption to another level, and they lived like they were demigods. They lived like they were gods. They lived, stealing, amassing wealth, giving fake contracts and running the country aground, despite the massive wealth coming from oil. And so another coup was inevitable. Another coup was inevitable. And President Shehu Shagari was toppled. And this time, who came on? Idiagbon and Head of State General Muhammadu Buhari came in. And they came, this one came in with a fight, came in and said Nigerians were corrupt. And we picked up all the politicians. They gave them military martial judgments. Some people were given up to 115 years in jail. Some were given 125. Some were given 150 years. A lot of politicians, and they were clamped into jail. And this country was boiling again. They came up again that a lot of people needed to be disciplined. I mean, why would you not clean your environment? Why would you not queue up when you are going to a place? Why are you lawless? And they brought up the war against indiscipline. Why? And Nigerians were really having it hot. Head of State General Muhammadu Buhari, and there's a second man, General Tunde Diagbon. They made this country rough within this period with their anti-corruption stance, with their war against indiscipline. It was such a tough one. So again, of course, another coup had to take place, and this one brought the coup of Abacha, Babangida and co, and Babangida became the head of state. This one came with a tutu smile. A tutti smile. Every other time he smiled, the gap in his teeth were showing. And Nigerian said, yes, we have a laughing president. This time, we have a laughing head of state. He's going to do well. Of course, the gentleman stayed 8 years. He even wanted to be a life president. He did so many things. He considered a lot of things, but he wanted to become a life president. Once again, despite it all, history dealt with him again. There was another coup, and, he had to go. But before he left, he instigated.
I remember in Aba, I was walking in the front of the house, and I had a Nigerian flag in my hand, and there were a lot of school children, because my mom was a teacher, school children coming to our house, and the flag was the earliest impression in my mind. The Nigerian flag must have been given to all the children, school-age children, because I had one, and I remember the crowd, the number of school children coming to our house were quite a lot. So it's vague, but that's my earliest recollection. With my mom being a single mother after the death of my father, we were struggling, but the good thing is that we had our own house. My mom was taking rent from our house in Aba, and we did not have to pay rent. So that helped a lot. My mom being also a professional was getting some salary, which placed us probably slightly above the average. If my father had been alive, we would have been probably upper class, because by then my father has gone to university and come back and was actually hoping to hold a very, very high position in the education system, maybe a principal of a college. So, but without him, like I said, my mom being a single mother, struggled a bit. But and all in all, we were above average. The onset of the war was beset by rumors. there were just too many rumors about Hausas coming to take people to kill, about Hausa people killing Igbos in the north. Those rumors were not empty. A lot of them were truthful. The pogrom of 1966 was a reality. A lot of Igbos were killed in the north. After the killing of the Igbo in the north, the Easterners were very upset the way thousands of people were killed in the north, and decided that the Federation could not stay the way it was. It had to be renegotiated. Like I said, the air was rife with rumors of all kinds. And then we knew when the war broke out, because the northern troops started invading Nsukka, and Ojukwu reacted by sending, first of all, the police. Because when this crisis started, a lot of Igbos who were in the police force came back, a lot of Igbos who were in the army came back, and they were the nucleus of the Biafran Defense Force. So at the break of the war, before even my mom left Aba, he sent me to go to Arochukwu to stay with my grandfather, because she felt that Arochukwu was safer than Aba, and she was right, because it was not long after I left, by early 1968, Aba fell to the federal troops, and my parents had to scramble back to Arochukwu. So my earliest memory of that time was the air raids in Aba, because at that time also in our house in Aba, my uncles, my maternal uncles, had come back from Enugu to be living in our house in Aba. So in a way it was a bittersweet experience, because I had all my uncles around, which was a joy to have them. Uncle JJ, Uncle Philip, Uncle Xavier, all of them had come back from their various stations in Enugu, because Enugu fell to the federal troops before Aba. So they had come back to stay with us then. And there was this incessant air raids on Aba by the Federal Air Force, raiding Aba, dropping bombs. One of my early memories of the war is we hiding under, the tunnel, the gutter tunnel in front of our house. Whenever there was air raid, we will rush in there to hide. And luckily, none of my immediate family members were killed, but a lot of people were killed during these air raids in Aba. But none of my immediate family members, or even extended family members, was killed. A contingent of the mobile police came and occupied my former primary school. So I made friends with them. I used to go there to help them, help them, do chores for them, and they used to reward me with, gifts, sweets, and things like that. So those were bittersweet memories, because there was these heightened activities. We couldn't go to school, which was, for me at that time, a joy. Staying at home, going to the mobile police barracks, being with my uncles. All those were joy, but the counter of it is that there was a lot of air raids, and there was also fear in the air, because you didn't know whether you will survive the day and whether your family members will survive the day. Dead bodies were not everywhere at that stage of the war, because the front line wasn't at Aba, but the air raids produced some dead bodies. The syndrome of child soldier wasn't a big problem in the Biafra war. There was a time when soldiers became younger and younger, but it wasn't a big. I remember that in 1967, I'd gone to join what was called the Boys Brigade, and I was not selected. That time I would have been around 10 years or thereabout. I was not selected on account of my being very young. We were so enthusiastic to help the war effort. When boys bus company was being formed and people were being invited. Everybody went. I went. My cousins. We all went. We wanted to be involved, to wear army uniform and be kitted out for war. But I was not chosen. I didn't make it, and again, they didn't take that many people because the people that came, I tell you, the field, I think the back golf course was full of people, young people, children. Then I remember one day, because we've been going for about a week, one day, my mom came back. She said, "You're not going again, you're not going again." At that time, it was like a picnic atmosphere. Nobody realized that going to be a boys' company, going to the war front could mean death. So my mom has had rumor that some of the people who were taken were killed in the war front. So she forbid me to go to be chosen. She said, "You are not going again." So I didn't go after that.
So both parents and children were unaware of the potential fate by joining?
Yeah. How will I say, the atmosphere was so charged with national favor to help the war effort to go and fight, even though we didn't understand very well the consequences of war, which unfolded gradually to people. Now you're talking about malnutrition. Malnutrition started seeping in as people were displaced and people ran away from their normal place of residence and economic activities were disrupted. You saw malnutrition start creeping in. We were lucky because we moved from Aba, where we were settled, to my hometown in Arochiko. And then when I went there, first of all, I was with my grandfather. And then when my mom came, she immediately went straight into trading, and she was trading on fish, and she was trading on foodstuff like fish. Yes, so we were not exposed to malnutrition. None in my family suffered from kwashiorkor, which was a hallmark of the Biafra Nigeria war. Because Arochiko is not far from the crossover, and Arochiko is full of tributaries, of river tributaries. So there was a lot of fish in Arochiko. In those days, and it still is, because of the sheer number of rivers around Arochiko. If you could measure Ijuku's popularity in 1968, it would have been 100%. He was so popular. But with the progression of the war, you understand, the death and deprivation, the lack of food, the lack of nutrition, the lack of comfort, people started questioning the war. But everybody was convinced that the war was forced on the Igbos, that we didn't want to go to war. So that was a moral sustaining feeling factor in the war. A lot of people realizing that we really didn't have any other option than to go to war to defend ourselves. It wasn't as if we were invading the Biafran territory, the Nigerian territory. It was just that we were defending the Biafran side of Nigeria, and we wanted independence because of the pogrom of 1966. So people were willing to endure hardship. But with death, if you lose a family member, then you start rethinking, why should I lose somebody? And a lot of people died. My family, my immediate and extended family, we did lose people before the end of the war. I lost my favorite uncle Izuma. My mother's first brother, their most senior brother, junior to my mother, but yes, the firstborn of their family. We lost him during the war. By the time he died in 1969, he was shot in the war around. He was conscripted, and he was shot in the chest. And then he was brought to hospital in Ututu, which is a nearby town to Arochiko. I went to see him one day in 1969. I went to see him. When he saw me, he was so happy. He said he didn't know whether he would survive this war or not, but that he's so glad he saw me. I stayed with him till it was going to be dark, and I had a long distance to walk home. Then I left him. I left him hoping that I will see him again. The bullet had entered from the front of his chest and exited at the back. And probably if there was adequate medical treatment, he would have survived. He was hanging on when he was in the military hospital in Ututu until he was now transferred to Abriba. And then when he went to Abriba, it wasn't long. Abriba fell to the federal troops and we lost contact with him, and he never came back from the war. So I believe that, probably when the federal troops overran the hospital, they killed him and probably every other person who was there. There was incident at Asaba where the federal troops came and killed a lot of people. Even though the Asaba people welcomed them, they still killed a lot of the town folks of Asaba. So there were things like that. There was also the atrocities that the Biafran troops committed, like the Assam wipeout, when the Assam people of Cross River State helped the federal troop to come into their town. If I recall it correctly, the Biafran side went and fought them and drove them out, and then decided to mass punishment of the people. So there were these atrocities which we heard about, that being a child, still a child till after the war, we had these rumors. Like I said, one of the hallmarks of the Biafra Nigeria war was the abundance of rumors. There were stories that were raised to raise morale, like Johnny Wabeke and B26, which was the Biafran effort. The Biafran effort at that time, which was non-existent, managed to gather a Second World War B26 plane. And the Biafran side, let me say, they hired a British pilot who was, became a legend, Johnny, who, a lot of stories were built here that Johnny Wabeke being a European, Johnny Wabeke was bombing Nigeria. I mean, Nigeria had a more proper air force than Biafra, and it wasn't a long time they destroyed the B-26, and that rumor gradually faded away. So there were rumors raised by the Biafran side to boost morale during the war. Because we were still in Arachika when the war ended, and when peace broke out, people gradually went back to their stations. Things have come back to fairly normal. But between 1970 and 71, there was no really appetite or room for resentment or anything. Then there were now 12 states of the Federation, and we were in the East Central states. And the Ibibios had received their own Cross River State, and the Riverine people were in River State. So the Eastern region has been carved into 3 states. So people were just busy getting on with their lives. In adversity, there's a great act of kindness, and that was a hallmark of the war. People putting their own life at risk to help others, to rescue people who were bombed out, to give accommodation to strangers during the war. Because we all had, especially at the beginning of the war, the whole people in the East had this sense of purpose to defeat the northern invaders, the federal government, and establish our nation, Biafra nation. And everybody's hand was on deck to achieve that.
Yeah, Biafra, Biafra. Yeah, Superstar Media. Tell me about Biafra. We going back to the motherland. Tell me about Biafra. I wanna know. Tell me about Biafra. We going back to the motherland. Tell me about Biafra, Biafra. I wanna know. We going back to the land. We going back to the motherland. Biafra, Biafra. Tell me about Biafra. We going back to the land. Tell me about Biafra. We going back to the motherland. Tell me about Biafra, Biafra. Tell me about Biafra. We going back to the land.